Hello everybody, my name is Andre Beck and this video is about KNIX, a high-performance serverless platform that we open sourced on GitHub. One of the best things about KNIX is that it minimizes those dreaded cold start delays for serverless function executions, and it does that while still being very resource efficient. KNIX also comes with a number of developer tools, one of which is the Web IDE, which I'm going to focus on in this video. So let's switch over to it. Here it is. So this video is a follow-up to the general KNIX tutorial that my colleague Parjat recorded. If you're new to KNIX and haven't seen that video yet, I recommend to start with that one. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the aspects of the KNIX web interface that were not part of the tutorial. And I'm also going to talk about an example serverless app which does speech-to-speech translation. So the first feature I want to show you is the workflow import feature. With this feature, you can import a serverless application into KNIX by uploading a zip file that contains your ASL workflow definition, your function code, as well as any function dependencies that your application may have. So for example, if your application depends on a pip installable library, you can include a requirements.txt file that lists the name and version of that library. And you can also include any other file that your application may need, as long as the zip file adheres to the directory structure that's shown here. So for my example speech-to-speech application, I already prepared such a zip file. So let's go ahead and import that application now. All right, so it looks like that was successful. So let's take a look at the app in the workflow editor. Here's the workflow definition. It's an ASL state machine. And we can look at the visualization. Need to untangle it a bit first. So the basic idea for this app is to take a voice recording as input and then translate it into 3 different target languages: Italian, French, and German. And then for each target language, the app first transcribes the recording and then translates the transcript and then finally converts the translation back to speech. So hence there are 3 different functions. The speech-to-text part uses the IBM Watson speech-to-text engine. The translate and the text-to-speech part use the corresponding Amazon services for that task. All right, so let's go ahead and deploy this workflow. And that's going to take a few seconds. So in the meantime, I want to show you the KNIX object store. So through this interface, you can create and add new objects, download, delete, or even edit existing objects. And KNIX supports key value objects, as well as maps, sets, and counters. And all these data types can be stored in different buckets. So there's always the general storage default bucket, but you can also go ahead and create your own buckets. And there's also the option to store objects in a special private workflow storage bin, which makes them only accessible to that particular workflow. All right. So my workflow has now been successfully deployed, and I would like to be able to test it by uploading an audio recording to the KNIX object store, and that should then trigger my workflow. So for that, we need to first create a new bucket that we can then use for this purpose. So let's call it recordings. And now we need to go to the workflow editor and set up this the storage trigger for that. So it lists the existing buckets, and then I can just switch it to on. That's all I need to do. So we're now ready to test the app by uploading an audio recording to the bucket that we created. So let's do just that. We first have to select the correct bucket. And now we can create a new object. Let's call it recording1.mp3. And I previously already recorded a short clip, which we can use. Now we can also listen to it real quick.
It's raining cats and dogs.
That was it. So this upload should have triggered our workflow. Let's see if that happened. We can open now the workflow execute dialog, and there it is. This is the workflow execution timeline, and we can see the different functions that were executed in parallel. And the last three functions should each have created a new audio object in the object store. So let's go back to the object store, the general storage bucket, and yes, there are three different MP3 files, and these are the translations. Let's download them all, and then we can listen to them.
Piove cani e gatti.
That was Italian, I think.
Il pleut des chats et des chiens.
French.
Es regnet Katzen und Hunde.
And German. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is how to access these objects through the microfunctions API. So let's just say you wanted to use these translations in one of your functions. So let's create a new function. And the way you do that is you would use the context object and then in this case, the get method to read the object. So if you click on it, it lists the objects that are currently in the default bucket. So you can just pick the one you're interested in, click on it again. Just keep in mind that these objects would be base64 encoded, so you may have to decode them since the KNIX key value store only accepts strings. So I also wanted to show you that the microfunctions API documentation is part of the web interface. So this is where you can look up any details about the API. So the last thing I want to show you is that the KNIX Web IDE also has some limited support for debugging. So for that, let's go ahead and create a new workflow. We always need to add a state name in the workflow definition, as well as at least one function. We can just use the function we had already created. If I mouse over the function name in this pop-up, it shows me the source code of that function. So that looks good. You can save the changes. So now we need to add some code to this function to throw an exception to see what happens. So let's save the changes and then deploy and execute this workflow. All right, so if I execute the workflow, I can already see in the timeline that this execution was not successful. If I mouse over it, I can see the function log output and see that there was an exception that was raised. There's now also a button in this dialog that I can click on, and then that takes me to the particular function in my workflow that raised this exception or caused the error and highlights also the corresponding line. So now I can fix the issue and then save the changes and redeploy and execute my workflow. All right, that's all I had for this video. If you are interested in playing around with some example apps for KNIX, you can go to the use cases section in the KNIX documentation. There's actually a slightly different version of the language translation app that I demonstrated in this video. And you can simply import the source code for that by pressing on this import button here. All right, if this video piqued your interest in the KNIX serverless platform, you can either go to knix.io and register for a KNIX account on our hosted installation, or you can go to GitHub and deploy your own instance. We also have a Slack channel where you can get support if you need any help. All right, that's that's it from me. Thanks for watching.